Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Mariela Saba, and I'm a Stop LAPD Spying Coalition coordinating team member. I'm going to be facilitating this tonight's meeting, and my comrade and friend Chela Coleman will be joining and co-supporting soon as well. As you know, in any of our meetings, we are recording. So if you'd like to have your camera off or on, it's up to you. Feel free, however it feels best for you. Please take care of yourself. I thank you so much. It's the end of the day, so it's always so special to see folks come together in the end of the day after so much has probably already happened in our lives. So thank you for showing up. This is the Gender and Sexuality Committee meeting. This is the space that we created to look at the intersections of the police state surveillance and gender justice. So thank you for being part of this work. Tonight is the last meeting of this year, and we will continue onward. We wanted to use tonight's space to reflect back on the year, to hear your input on what you have liked, what has been working, where is there room for improvement for these meetings, and collective envisioning on what we would like next year, the months to come, given the political moment that we're always in. But this moment in time, how could this space, this work inform our movement? What would we like to contribute to our movement? So that's the topic for tonight. And I first just let's see. It looks we're pretty kind of large group, yes. Um, I hope we get to hear everybody's input at some point. I want to make space for everybody's voice to be heard or read. If you want to use the chat to contribute, if you want to speak, I think we just have to take the mute off. Hamid is co-hosting and can help us with that. Maybe a digital hand, raising your hand, or visibly showing that you want to speak or putting it in the chat. However you can so that you are heard and seen. We want to hear and see you. I want to just I want to I'm used to doing this in person, so if we were in person we'd be in circle and we would love to hear from everyone. So that's kind of the intention that I'm flowing with. The main question that I want to see first is, have folks participated in this gender and sexuality committee meeting in the past? If this is your first time, I'm wondering if you've been in any of our past webinars. So if you don't feel like these questions around the committee that you might not be able to answer these questions, feel free to answer these questions in general. If you've been in other webinars, that works too. If this is your first time in any of our webinars, you can help us think about what you would like to see, what brought you to this one, and maybe what would bring you back, and what would you like to co-create in future sessions. So I want to ask if everyone or if anyone has not been here before or has, yeah, I think that's how we could do it. It's your first time, Sahar. Cool. Welcome. So for folks like Sahar, this is a good space for you to hear what has been working for other folks and think about what being in future sessions. If there's a way to hear from everyone, I would love to first just begin with what has worked for you, what has been good in past webinars in the Gender and Sexuality Committee, if you've been here before or in other webinar spaces. We want to start with what's good, what's working, maybe a memorable moment or highlights that you've had in past sessions. And I can I can model by sharing. This year we've been hosting a lot of different folks from different places, and I really have enjoyed having more transnational conversations on gender and sexuality and gender justice. That's one of my highlights. And I want to pass it to anyone who would like to get us started. I see you're clapping, Austin. Thank you. So just checking in. Anyone want to? I want to hear back from as many folks as possible. And I know Ricky, when we were starting, you said you had some thoughts or comments. I wonder if you want to get us started.
Ricky, go ahead and if you want to unmute.
Okay, great. One of the questions I had was, um, yes, one of the questions I had was, I mean, I've never really attended one of the webinars, and I've been dissenting for quite some time, and I was curious to, you know, some of the things that attracted me to actually join and also tend to stop LAPD was, I have experience in, I guess, in a victim, you know, uh, some of the uh, some of the things that we discuss in these meetings, and uh, I've never attended, like I said, one of the webinars, and I'm just curious to know, does anyone or what type of what actually is discussed in the meeting? What are the dialogue about? Do you literally talk about mostly research of some of the cruelty or discussions we have in the regular meetings we have here of the other 3 weeks, or actually what I mean? Could you give me a brief idea of what goes on in those webinars?
Thank you, Ricky. Thank you for sharing. Well, we do have a lot of different fights when it comes to fighting the police state. So we have, I hope this is helpful for everyone just to go over. We have 4 meetings a month, unless because there's usually 4 Tuesdays a month. We have a meeting every Tuesday. If there's a fifth Tuesday, we also use it to get together. The first Tuesday, this one is dedicated to the intersections between gender and sexuality, the police state, and surveillance. So we created this space to make sure that we were looking at the police state and surveillance through a gender justice lens, to really to look at the impacts of policing on femme bodies, on gender nonconforming folks, on trans folks, on intersex folks. Um, that space was not initially there with the coalition. We wanted, this was a space that we felt was missing, and we needed to make sure that as we're looking at surveillance, we're not missing this very important part of the state's gaze at the way the state looks, in particular at folks who are femme folks, LGBTIQ folks. So that's what this space in particular has been, and we've hosted different folks from our LGBTIQ community to share their experiences and their fight, and we've been building with folks to work on our general goal as a coalition to abolish the police state. So all of our meetings have, are part of, are part of the same organization, so they're not separate, but we do have a shared commitment to abolition. And other meetings center the way the police state targets young people, youth, and that's the second Tuesday. That would be next week. We have a general coalition meeting the third week, where we discuss all the different fights and usually have a political analysis of what's happening in the times and what's the coalition's role in the fight. And our fourth meeting is dedicated to looking at data driven policing. And there have been lots of fights there. And a win, we had a win not long ago to dismantle laser, the Los Angeles Strategic Extraction and Restoration, one of the policing programs. So our work exposes police programs, works to dismantle them, and there's a lot of community-based research to in order to programs and projects of the police. That's the best summary I could give you right now. I hope that's helpful to everybody, and you're welcome every Tuesday. There's a space. There's also working groups. There's other work in between these meetings, and we also attend the Los Angeles Police Commission meetings to disrupt that space and to make sure communities' voices are there. There's a lot of other members here who are welcome to chime in, and folks who are just joining. We're using this last meeting of the year for the Gender and Sexuality Committee to review what has worked this year. This year we transitioned to online, so it's very different, but we've been able to have many webinars. We're in the 30s, I think, now, approaching 40 or so. So a lot of work happens here, and we've been able to sustain this work during the pandemic and making sure that there's a critical lens on the pandemic and the police state too, and that we're still gathering.
Great. Anybody else who's been in this space for a long time? I can just add to building on thank you, Mariela, building on Mariella's. And thank you, Ricky, for asking that question, because it helps everybody else in understanding who's new to the space or who's been into the space and not picking up these or just maybe just doesn't have a full understanding. So I would maybe just summarize in like 3 or 4 different ways that what is our understanding of the police state? Number one, number two, and this is all done collectively. How is it impacting the communities? What are the ways it's impacting the community? And in a sense, that's where the research piece comes in as well, by understanding and using different tools, whether through public filing for public records with the police departments or doing our own research or other articles. And then with that sort of a larger understanding directly, which is rooted in human impact, not only just looking at through a very narrow scope of constitutional violations or invasion of privacy, but real impact on the community, then what is our fight back? So it's about knowing our fight, and it's really about building power, collective knowledge, and to organize to dismantle. So we don't do any legislative work. We don't ask for any reform. We don't push for anything that would be like a kinder, gentler way of impacting the community. Our goal is really to popularize this issue, and to really just have folks have a clear understanding in their own ways, and to fight back. So I know that Jamie and Audrey and other folks have been in this space for a minute, so folks want to share their thoughts. Anybody else?
What I love is the different focus. You have different workshops with different, each with a different focus. Just like when we used to, in the old days, when we used to go in person, and different days were, had a different focus. And this is, I don't regularly attend the one for the impact on intersectionally, with gender and sexuality issues, but it is obviously one that I think is so important and so subject to violence by the state. So I came to hear, the voices of people who are much more knowledgeable and impacted than me. Thank you.
Thank you. Cool.
So Mariela, maybe we can try and hopefully we're not getting a Zoom bomb. So I'm just going to unmute everybody. And in case if folks want to just unmute themselves, please feel free to do that.
Okay. And I am finally sitting. I was horizontal, nursing my baby. I feel more ready for y'all.
Anybody else wants to share their thoughts about how this has been working for them, or so folks are unmuted, please unmute at will.
These spaces are meant to be co-created, and even though we've transitioned into a webinar space and we're often just viewing, these spaces are meant to be participatory, and we welcome you to be part of them. So evaluation, I think, is a very healthy action for any organization and for movement and for us in general to really take a look at what is good, what's working, and to grow, to really look at what is also missing and what can be better in our spaces. So I really want to, offer that space for us and gift us that opportunity. If there have been things that you've liked, guest speakers that you've seen that you'd like to hear back from, and areas that you'd like for us to improve or things you'd like to see in the future. But I just want to start with what's good, if that's okay with folks. And if not, I'll call on your names if you'd like. I did get like 3 messages from a couple of you who said it's your first time. So maybe for folks who it's their first time, to hearing what brings you to the meeting is really helpful too, and what you would like to see. And you can also let us know if you don't want to speak out loud, and if you want to write it and it feels better for you to do that, that's welcome.
Pierce, you want to make a comment? Because
Well,
your
yes.
mic is not coming through. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is my first time here, but I've known about these Tuesday 6 p.m. meetings for years. I get all the emails from Hamid. And I used to teach evenings, so I couldn't attend the meetings. But this semester, I'm teaching the afternoon, so I am free at 6 p.m. on Tuesdays, but I had forgotten about this until I got an invitation from Marsha Steinberg. And I thought, I'm sorry, I didn't read the details. I thought we would be talking about LAPD surveillance, which is something that concerns me. But as a cis-het man, I'm not sure I can contribute to a discussion on gender and sexuality as much as maybe some other people in this group. So, and, but I am aware that it's an important issue, and I will listen to those who have something to say, if you don't mind.
Can you say your name, please?
Perias.
Perias.
Perias, yeah, P-E-R, yeah, you can see the spelling, Perias.
Okay. I wanted to say it as well as possible, Perias. Yeah. Thank you for being present and for joining. And we do definitely discuss LA surveillance in meetings. Today's a little bit different. I want to invite you. The third Tuesday is when we have our general coalition meeting.
The third Tuesday of the month.
And that's where you can hear yes. And you're welcome to every Tuesday. Also, the fourth Tuesday on data-driven policing may be of interest to you too. And if there's anything in particular that you wanted to hear, you could let us know. This is a good meeting to give feedback in terms of what you'd like to hear. And I appreciate you being open to listening. You're very welcome to.
Are there meetings where you?
Listen in.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Are there meetings where you focus on immigrants and immigrants or ethnic minorities? Well, I guess everyone's a minority here in LA.
Oh, that's a good question. Surveillance impacts immigrants, and we do definitely talk about that. I would say in the general coalition meeting, that would be a good space. There isn't like a specific meeting where we just focus on migrant community,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of room in our meetings to create working groups and to create focus spaces like that.
Okay.
If that's something of interest, that's really good to know, and I'm noting that too.
Okay.
I could maybe, thank you, Pierce. I think you raise a very key question as being a cis-identified person. I think the way we look at that is that how surveillance is weaponized and how surveillance is a weapon not just in the hand of the state, but also in the hands of individuals as well. That how communities how communities can be targeted, how they could be demonized, how they could be sort of like become suspect bodies in the eyes not of the state but also in the individuals too, which then basically guide the state, inform the state, and demand the persecution or special or targeting of various communities. So I think it's a so for us the way we see that is that how our bodies being stalked as well. I mean, obviously, we saw that well, Chela is coming into the conversation as well. That how there's been a ongoing murder of Black trans women, and the interpersonal violence that's being instigated. We are seeing like this the rise of fascism and nationalism as well. When we look at the Proud Boys, for example, I mean, who are very much in partnership with the state, their primary focus is on misogyny and patriarchy. So how that is being used to target femme-identified and non-cis identified bodies as well. So in a sense, our goal really is to look at surveillance and the policing of the body, not just in the context of police as who wears uniforms, but how are we policing each other? And in that surveillance and information collection or targeting of people becomes really critical in that violence as well. So I just wanted to add that. So I think thank you for raising, but welcoming other folks to chime in because I think you raised a very good question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Good.
Hamid.
Welcoming Chela. So Chela, just welcoming because the question was that as a cis person, would I be am I in the correct space or am I in the right meeting and what does it mean? So we were just having this conversation.
Yeah, I don't want to feel like I'm spying on a group that
No.
doesn't want me. But I do have trans friends and I, understand the issues, but I personally have not been a target.
Sure.
Thank you.
I would love to say something. Hi, my name's Chella. I am an organizer with SLAP LAPD Spying Coalition. I'm sorry, y'all. Yeah, I've been doing work for like the last 9 to 10 years with them, and I've been doing organizing work around intersectional struggle for the last 9 to 10 years. With that being said, I just want to welcome you. I can't pronounce your name, Perea.
Yes, that's it.
Perias? Okay. Yeah, this meeting is for everyone to just learn and grow, right? Like, it's also about learning, right? It's also about hearing the center of the folks that are speaking and just listening, So I just want to, welcome myself in the space. And sorry I'm late. I had a therapist appointment, and yeah, I'm gonna mute myself now.
Thank you, Chela. And Chela's been helping lead and hold this space and create it. So just want to honor that. And Chela, we've just been initiating some evaluation space and hearing folks' questions and any reflections on this meeting and these meetings in particular. I got some individual messages from some folks saying this is their first time at this meeting or in our meetings in general, like Perias and Ricky, who also shared. To see if there is anyone else who has other webinars or in these meeting gender and sexuality meeting webinars. If you have any highlights, memorable moments, or feedback from our past meetings. And Chela has been in, I think, all of them or most of them. So if it helps to hear some of the things that we've done, or folks that we've hosted, we can also share that too. So I want to open it. Go for it.
To me or to anyone?
Chela. I was gonna open it to anyone, but but if you want, you can go ahead. You're good. First, if anyone else would like to share who has been at these meetings or other webinars, we're open to that too. I got someone on Stack, yes, who sent me a direct message. Thank you. If anyone else wants to go before.
There's a comment there, Mariela, in the comment box that, just maybe building upon Perius's point that this could be a little bit, because the flyer talked about that this space is dedicated to continuing our intergenerational struggles to dismantle violence with a deeper look at intersections of surveillance, police state, and patriarchy in our movement. So I think that could be an expectation that folks walked in about that conversation. So yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't see that comment. Maybe it was to
Yeah, no,
you
they just that,
individually.
but it just came because this came to me privately. So that's how. Sometimes when we don't have the chat open, it just goes to the hosts and co-hosts.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, we tried to be clear in the description that we're gonna be looking at the past, present, and future of these meetings. If there isn't any um any feedback from past meetings, we could get into what we would like to see in our future meetings. But just wanted to check before we close that part of it. And there was somebody on Vivan. Hey, Vivan, would you like to share next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Vivon. I've only been to a couple of the gender and sexuality meetings. I remember one, I think in August, uh, where Familia, the Trans Queer Liberation Movement, and another group who was really great from Bogota, who I cannot remember right now, but they both presented, and one, those are always amazing in these meetings, because using gender and sexuality as this linking tool to understand work happening on the ground is, you know, kind of what it's all about. And I thought especially it was also great. They were doing work to abolish ICE, and using sort of gender and sexuality as not only a weapon but a, identifying the attack, um, multivalently. And I thought those definitely are really cool for me. Um, maybe that specific group I just really like, but definitely anytime that there are folks from groups or the groups like representing themselves, I think is really cool in these meetings particularly. And I like the idea of uh, like creating unity on the ground that we wouldn't otherwise have access to. Um,
Awesome, thank you. I think the other group is the Red Comunitaria Trans, the Trans Community Network, and we can share that we've stayed in touch and have had regular meetings with folks. Um, the trans community network. They're based in Bogota, Colombia. For folks who may have missed that meeting, they've joined us twice. They've been at other meetings with us too. And I appreciate your feedback. I think we've been doing that in almost every meeting, hosting other folks, and being online together has allowed us to host folks from afar and build a larger transnational movement to abolish policing, with more folks who are also trans identified and part of the LGBTIQ community. Yeah, I feel that too. Thank you, Vivan. And is there anyone else who wants to share some highlights or memorable moments from past meetings, things you would like to see again, or for us to continue? And if not, we can continue on to what we would like to build, given the political moment we find ourselves in, and how we can inform the fight. How can we use this space in particular to shape the world we want to see and make our contribution through this space? I do want to open it to you, Chela. I don't know if you were going to share earlier some of the highlights or things from past meetings, maybe sharing what we have been doing. Chela helped host last month's meeting. It landed on election day, so there was some work analyzing what is this political moment for trans and queer folks, LGBTIQ folks. If you want to, we could use that as a jump start, a starting point for what we want to see in future meetings or what we could be doing in this fight.
I would love to see a lot more, two things. I would love to see more language justice, number one, right? Let's just be real. I think these conversations are great, but there are folks that are not monolingual English speakers that we could have in our midst, as well as ASL interpreting, which also connects to my next thing of what I want to see is more work on the ground, especially knowing that Skid Row has a very high population of folks who are disabled, right? So thinking of disability justice and what does that look like through the eyes of surveillance, and as well as state violence, right? I think that's my commitment next year is to be a little bit more on the ground about those two things. Yeah, and get it popping, get more folks who talk about accessibility, talk about language justice, as well as cultural competency of the things that we talk about, right? Because a lot of the times we do talk like this language that is quote unquote woke or very, so like not dumbing it down because I don't believe in that, but like, but making it so that other folks can be a part of the conversation, making it so that it does affect, like, my next door neighbor who doesn't speak Spanish, I mean English, just saying, that kind of thing. Yeah. I will say that I loved what Vivan said. I don't know their pronouns, so I'm gonna use they. What they said about connecting with La Familia and Las Mujeres de Colombia, that touched me. I love our international look this like a few months ago that we did. That was lit. And I hope we continue with those things. I do want to see more Black, trans, and queer-led things here, just being real. And in my thing of needing that. And yeah, I think I love the fact that almost every time, no, all the times I've thrown protests, Stop LAPD Spying has been there, watching the watchers, and I think that's amazing. So that's it. I'm gonna mute myself.
Thank you. And for folks who might not know, um, the Watchers is one of the skills or practices that we have in the coalition when there are actions where the police is present, which they usually are in not coalitions in general throughout Los Angeles. We position ourselves to be able to observe and pay attention to the way the police is positioning themselves around movement and actions, and we take note of that, and we've taken it as far as able to interfere or interview and talk to them and record it. And we have some videos we could show you of that work if you're ever, if that's an interest that you have in maybe learning some of those skills on how to observe and pay attention to the way the police state is um, positions it in our movements and in our actions. There is a lot of movement, a lot of actions, and staying safe and creating our safety is part of what we do, and informing other folks in movement about how the police state is present in actions and what are their surveillance technologies that we have identified that they use there that we should be aware of. Oops. So for folks who are here just thinking about the moment in time that we find ourselves in. Oh, thank you, Hamid. Just posted a link for us on Watch the Watchers. For folks who are here and want to participate in future meetings, just thinking about the moment in time that we're in and regrounding ourselves, recollecting ourselves, thinking about where we would like to see this work go, how we would like to contribute to the larger movement, what we would like to see, so that this is not just a meeting space, but it's a space where we also generate actions and work towards abolition, which is huge life journeys for us. But every time we gather, we are contributing to that. So I just want to open it for that, for any contributions or thoughts on what you would like to see, given the political moment. Space is a lot more interactive and intimate. So if that's newer for folks, just want to welcome you into that. And I see a hand. Ricky, would you like to share next? I see a digital.
Yes. I'm well. First of all, I know that we all are aware that we have President-elect Biden coming into office, and he's nominating a lot of his cabinet. And I am very much interested in trying to make sure our message is given to some of the people who are appointed that can help our cause. You know, I don't know how many people are aware of what we are experiencing here in Los Angeles and across the United States because of some of the intimidation that goes along with, the exposure to make sure people are silent about it. But we need to make sure that our message is put in the hands of some of these cabinet members or some of these appointed people in office in DC. So I would love to definitely make sure that we have a ground team that's preparing, to for the new cabinet and the new administration that will be in January.
Thank you, Ricky. In the third Tuesday, our general coalition meeting, we usually do some political analysis around the time and maybe looking at at the administration that we are facing, could be a good thing for us to do, because they are a big part of the police state, and they are going to be part of our fight. So maybe I'm just suggesting maybe that's a space that we could take a deeper look at who are the players in the same game.
Maybe
And it's
just to
important.
add to that a little bit, Mariela, the Ricky's point, because obviously, Ricky, particularly in the context of gender and sexuality, we saw a massive assault on how particularly protections and some access, especially for trans folks, were completely eliminated. Obviously, just in a sense, while the right to be there is one thing, but in the context, I mean, that's absolutely, we want to abolish the military as well, but even going into restricting trans folks there, restricting in housing access, and how trans folks would have the access over there, the some of the protections or access to school children was eliminated as well, as to how they want to identify and celebrate their identities as well. So I think those are things that quite frankly, which were expanded during the previous regime, didn't happen by the goodwill of the people in power. I mean, they happened because people put their bodies on the line and just to fight for. So I think that's where our fight is, to be back in the street and to be really raising these things, and through these conversations particularly. And that's why one of the reasons why the coalition even has these very nuanced conversations as well, that how does the police state impact gender and sexuality? What are the ways that policies and actions and it gets operationalized to marginalize and to demonize the community? So thank you for asking that question. And I have one comment also, Mariela, which says that since cure/slash vaccine is in sight, hopefully you folks will start in-person meetings. Will these online meetings/slash webinars still continue? They have been the most informative and educational experience that I have had the last 6 months. Tuesday, 6 o'clock meetings have become such anticipation and fantastic hour and a half of life.
Nice. I see Jamie's hand next. I'll take your comment after. I'm so glad you've been educational. Thank you for that reflection. That's kind of the reflections we're looking for, to see what are folks liking about these spaces and what can be better. Um, well, it's not up to me. It'll be a collective decision to see if and when we transition to meeting in person, which is wonderful. How can we still sustain this webinar work, because it has allowed for some folks who cannot travel, some folks who are out of Los Angeles to join, and folks out of the country, out of this occupied land. So I vote for holding this in some shape or form. Um, but we will have to discuss how often can we do this if we're also doing this in person too. So thank you for the input, though. That that'll definitely be taken into consideration. I'm glad it's been useful. So we want to do more of that. I see two hands, and I see Andrew's hands clapping. Thank you, Andrew.
So we have
Shout out.
Jamie and then Audrey on stack.
Yes, go for it, Jamie. Good to hear you.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. I'm driving right now, so I'm sorry if my internet cuts out. One thing I thought is really interesting about this space as well, and kind of building on Hamid's comment about what the past administration has done, and kind of looking forward and building on what Ricky was saying about, like, what can we expect with this next incoming administration. And one of the most terrifying things that I thought happened with Health and Human Services was the attempt to create a biological standard for what male and female is. And that was probably one of the most, I think, terrifying things I thought that came out, and really building on work that Alok is doing, a gender nonconforming, beautiful, amazing artist, and kind of really looking at the fact that, you know, gender or sexuality, gender is like a social construct. And, you know, how people decide to identify is something of completely, you know, a person's choice. And it is something that is innate, that a person feels and, you know, chooses to act on. And we also had a webinar on the intersex person, and so much of this kind of understanding of gender and sexuality has just been created through time. And I mention Alok because of their analysis really draws us back to in the 19th to do surgical intersex babies was not only happening, but then happening in a way to genderize them, claiming that if you raise a person as male or you raise a person as female and you alter their bodies, that somehow you could create a man or a woman and put them in this box. And so I really kind of I'm wondering where our fight is going to be, and to be able to challenge, you know, and destroy these constructs in order to preserve life, because so much violence is kind of happens to especially Black trans women, and to people who are, you know, are you know, kind of are helping to liberate us from this dichotomy and this kind of violent oppression of gender, you know, heteronormativity. And so that's something that I think, you know, I really look forward to where this fight will be, in really kind of looking at that like biological surveillance of really trying to create these constructs. And so that's been something that not only have I seen a beautiful artist like Alok really kind of deconstruct for us and really dig deep into the history of that, but really look at how, you know, the coalition will further that analysis and popularize that analysis and fight, you know, against this kind of violence that attempts to, you know, kind of perpetuate this idea that there is man and there is woman.
Thank you, Jamie, for that powerful comment. And I'm also curious about the artist, if there's anything you would want to, I know you're driving, but if there's a moment in the meeting where you could drop something from Alok, and just for us to think about how powerful art is and how we could be using it. We've always used it in our fight, so just want to invite more of that work and more space for that. And thank you for naming surveillance of our biological selves, all these intense ways that the state wants to control our being. And I love that you named how we're just trying to preserve and protect life. I see you, Audrey, on Stack. Would you like to go next? Oh, thank you, Hamid.
Yeah, I guess what I feel you'll probably be addressing more and more over time in these meetings is, I mean, the LGBTQ plus community and transgendered and non-binary people have already, you know, there's already so much trauma and so much violence enacted on them, especially the Black community. But this last administration that is winding down, thank God, has made people in my life, you know, that are trans feel so disposable more than ever, you know. So I mean, the way that an executive order can just dispatch like all sorts of harm on people and dismissiveness and insult and injury, I just imagine that future meetings are going to be dealing a lot with the trauma of having people experience that total living in an era where we're already in COVID and there's so much anxiety and so much uncertainty, but to know that some administration can come and just like try to erase you, it was unthinkable.
Thank you, Audrey. I see you, Chella. Would you like to share next?
Yeah. While I understand the fear and the disposability that it feels to have someone like Trump in office, this thing is historically and historically been wiping out trans and two-spirit and gender nonconforming and intersex folks. It's funny because under Obama, he the same day he was like LGBT rights for all. He was challenged by a trans undocumented woman who was like, "You're deporting us. You are deporting us, and that's causing us to get raped and murdered and unstained and erased." So I understand people's need and want to be seen by the government, but I also like it's a double-edged sword, right? Because when they see us, there was this conversation I was watching a few months ago where this it was called The Grapevine. They have different topics, and this time they were talking about trans black. Why is there such an uptake in murders with trans black women? Right, this year we've seen it's like the most violent year that we've had, and one woman was like, "Well, it's about visibility," while the other one was like, "No, they see us. We're here. We exist. It's not, please see us. It's motherfucker, recognize my humanity. And if you don't, then move aside." And that's I think that's the attitude I want and I want to carry. I don't want to be like, please see us. No, as a black trans woman, it's motherfucker, you see me. I'm a 500-pound person. You see me. I'm here. Look at me, disrespect me, and get aside. I like real talk. And that's coming from my mouth. I'm sorry, I'm a mute. I just needed to say that. And the trans woman that I was mentioning was Genesis Gutierrez, Mashira, who was on one of these webinars. Just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Chella. Chella keeps it real. Thank you, Chella. Yes, that's a really good point. I'm just thinking about our work and visibility with the government or not. It's a really interesting question, and I am hearing my baby waking up, so I'm gonna bring them with us and pass it to anyone who would like to go next while I bring Janelli.
Anybody else wants to share? Everybody's super quiet.
So glad I heard Janelli. She was already at the edge of the bed, almost ready to plunge. Yay. This is Janelli, everybody. He's like, what's going on? I want to go back to sleep. So just for Janelli and everybody, we're just taking time to think about what's coming and what and our power in what's coming. What do we want to shape? I think your point, Chela, was really important. Yeah, a lot of our work in the coalition is not necessarily dictated or informed by who's in office, but this is a historical fight, longer journey of understanding how this land has been founded in enslavement and genocide, and the role policing has played throughout that has maintained this state. So we're pushing for dismantling and abolishing this. But a lot of our work is to keep an eye on who is who is in office or who is behind the scenes, visible or not.
I have a question, and I think it'll be good to maybe see if Vita, if you're up to be a part of this conversation, and also Jamie as well, and Chella and Mariela. I'm just kind of bringing everybody in. So as we are now moving into this stage, and this whole conversation around vaccine, and this whole conversation, and earlier, there's a group that we are looking at the impact of contact tracing and the massive expansion of the surveillance state of data collection as a result of during COVID. How Chella, do you see that? And Beta, if you have time to be part of this conversation, how do you think that it would have its own impact on various communities? Because we've seen how the impact has been, particularly of COVID, on the Black community, on the Latinx community, and the indigenous communities as well. Just the vulnerabilities, and kind of was reframing this into this whole, what Jamie was saying, this social construct of predisposition and this, that, and the other. So the harm is kind of set aside. So I just want to open it up to see, as we are moving into the next year, into this realm, that what are folks' thoughts about that in that specific context.
I'm just thinking of what we were, I think, discussing, earlier around like as soon as anything becomes criminalized, any way of like living or experiencing the world becomes criminalized, then you're going to have more contact with systems. And that system might be the healthcare system. That system might be trying to access housing. That system might be trying to access employment. And so what you guys covered last week in the webinar around how data, is not just, it's not about data. It's about who lives in databases. And then therefore, by living in the database, how does that put you in a place of vulnerability? I think for when we think about patriarchy, and we think about specifically our, we think about trans folks, or, and gender nonconforming folks, and anybody who is sitting on the margin, then I really want to just uplift what Chella was saying about, is it invisibility or like actually being in the margin and at the center at the same time? It's so confusing, right? Because what are we, it's not as if, folks are not seeing. When we're talking about margins, and when we're talking about margins, it isn't about visibility per se, as it is places that are targeted. And so that if you're living in the margins, that means you're in the databases. And so then contact tracing, if it is the vehicle through which we're trying to prevent disease transmission, then it's going to be thinking about where are the places and spaces that people are getting exposed, maybe more to COVID and not. And so then based on your gender and or sexual identity, does that mean that you're more likely or not to end up in a contact tracing database? And that's actually a question that we have. Like, I want to know that, right? Because I think that kind of helps us to understand a little bit about what you're asking. But we can maybe guess that in some places, yes, and in some places, no, right? But then the other part is that even if folks are or are not more disproportionately represented in a database, what does that then mean for those who are, in terms of how they are targeted, right? So as for us to then go through and see kind of just the segregation that's in the databases. And then Jamie's point around the biologization of gender, and then thinking through also then the demonization and dehumanization that comes from science, just looking at anybody's body, right, with the ways and tools of which it has the tendency or the inertia to want to look through a lens that always sees things as normal and then defining what is not normal. Like the particular experiences that trans folks have like in society, should they not feel comfortable in being able to access like what we're calling the mental health care system or mental health system, right? Like at different moments of their life. And then I'm just thinking here about like what vulnerability does that then introduce for them around, like you guys were talking about last week, generating risk profiles, right, for individuals. Is how comfortable are you going to feel talking to a therapist if you think that somehow what you're sharing and a diagnosis that's going to be made about you is somehow going to end up someplace that somebody else is then going to use to characterize like your risk of whatever, right? Like for risk assessments. So, you know, my mind is just kind of like trying to process everything you guys are saying, but then also putting it into conversation with the work that you guys have been doing over time. And I think we have a lot more questions, but we also know that the places that we have questions are places that we need to like get answers to, because that's probably where a lot of like the threat and instability is.
Thank you, Vita.
So in a sense, Beta, just to, so the risk assessment that you're talking about can then also be flipped into a threat factor as well, and which leads to further quarantining, which leads to further segregation, which leads to further targeting and demonization. That because the assumption of risk based upon these constructs then elevates that risk into a threat level, which then needs to be contained and controlled and criminalized. And that's where surveillance and policing gets even more escalated.
Yeah, and then, you know, when Jamie was bringing up, okay, biologization and categorization, like, you know, the idea that like you want to pursue and know and classify folks in these ways means that you're trying to structure them a certain way in a database. Now, does that have some sort of utility for people in the health or healthcare field? Whatever, that's also a conversation, right? Like another conversation. But how that, like you're saying, that categorization and quantification of risk that might seem to make sense to, you know, for me as a public health person, like how does that then create, how is that then used as threat assessment, right? In another database or in the hands of somebody else, really getting to what we've been talking about as the weaponization, right? Of any of the tools that we might use to say that we're trying to improve community or population health.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and, you know, thinking about all this stuff now and these conversations around vaccine, the CDC today deciding who would have access to a vaccine, you know, brings up a lot of different things about, you know, kind of how people are seen, who is vulnerable, who is, you know, valuable. And I think that, you know, again, like the intersections of thinking about, you know, how people would frame like, you know, healthcare justice really can't be addressed until the intersections of race, gender and sexuality, patriarchy, capitalism are all, you know, addressed. Because I think you know, once vaccines start to be distributed, we're going to have the question of who is vaccinated and who is not. And so the mobility is going to start to become an issue. And we already know that there are certain arenas and spaces that are starting to organize themselves to be able to have people fill out questionnaires as to whether or not they've been vaccinated. So mobility is going to start to become another factor on top of mobility issues and the freedom of movement that already exists. Second, you know, this idea that people are going to be afraid to get the vaccine is now being kind of pathologized, that these are anti-vaxxers, that these are people who, you know, who don't believe in science, where the long history of the violence of medicine particularly Western medicine, is not being addressed, is not being talked about. So therefore, we're not able to even address why people would not access, because it's being framed as, oh, these are, you know, anti-vaxxers, people who don't believe in science. But what it really is the healthcare system choosing not to address the long history of violence perpetrated, particularly on the Black community. So I think, you know, we can't really think about what like healthcare justice looks like if we're not integrating, you know, kind of these other issues of race, patriarchy, capitalism, because we won't ever get there unless those systems are, you know, abolished. Until the system that tries to, you know, quantify and categorize gender and sexuality is abolished, until, you know, systems of domination, particularly racism, is abolished and confronted. So so I think that, you know, it's going to be a very hard, you know, path that we're going to walk in. I think that the healthcare system is now basically being confronted with the fact that we aren't going to resolve the issue of COVID until these other issues of basic, you know, access to housing, food, you know, green spaces, until all those things get addressed. And so we're at a moment where that can actually become the issue, instead of being hidden by this kind of idea that that, you know, certain communities, because of, you know, their already maybe predisposition to health conditions, are, you know, if you fall in that category, you're like kind of pathologized as kind of like someone who doesn't take care of themselves, instead of dealing with, you know, what kind of system actually existed and exists already, that is, you know, has kind of made it almost impossible for a person to want to participate in that system at all. So we're really in a moment where that type of kind of exposing needs to happen in order for us to preserve life at this moment. And, you know, really being at the height of the pandemic right now, we don't see people kind of responding to that. We see what happened in City Hall today, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they're continuing the sweeps. We see people, you know, deciding and arguing to keep restaurants open because the government is failing to kind of provide any kind of life-sustaining resources to people, that all of a sudden put capital in front of life, especially in the moment that we're in right now. So so right now, I mean, it's all about exposing and demonstrating that these kinds of systems of domination need to be abolished in order for any kind of for, you know, for the most amount of life to be preserved.
Hi, hello, my name is O'Stone. I would like to respond to what Jamie just put into the space. I was watching Democracy Now! Earlier today, and they brought up the point that a lot of Black, Latinx, and other folk have not been participating in the trials and the testing. On the show, they also reference the long history of Black and Latin folk being tested on and experimented on unethically. And there is a history in America. We have to all acknowledge this history, that Black women were used as capital, Black men were used as capital in the slave trade to create more bodies to perpetuate and further the system of capitalism, to further the plantation and crop system. That was the foundation of the American system. So yeah, I think that it's hard to trust a vaccine where our people have not participated in trials, and that there is and that we have to acknowledge in the community that there is skepticism around the trustworthiness of Moderna and Pfizer these rushed vaccine companies. For a long time, I was listening to a Black Muslim Los Angeles social media star, and he was speaking a lot about how this vaccine could potentially harm young Black boys and girls, and how if I were to be vaccinated with this vaccine, that my children could have difficulties or some sort of um, difficulties like this. I can't think of the word now, but yeah, there is also this paranoia within inside me that, you know, I can't take this vaccine because I could also die from this at the same time. But, you know, I'm in between. I don't know.
Thank you.
The Ostan, I hope I'm saying your name right. My apologies if I'm not. But that the Democracy Now! This morning, what was also really interesting is in the celebration of World AIDS Day, the and I'm forgetting the name of the guest that they had who was speaking about it, how they were highlighting biomedical solutions have not fixed the problem of global HIV/AIDS. So the irony of also putting those things together, right? Like what has been like the pharmacological interventions, what have they done for improving the health of the global South, right? And the global South that lives here, like in the United States, which would be the Black, Indigenous, right? And Latinx communities. Like what has been the benefit? And I think that is the part that has everybody pausing at we know that you have said that we have mistrust, distrust. We know that you say that that you acknowledge you are not trustworthy, but there has been nothing to be shown that you are structurally different than who you were, right? Just from 5 minutes ago, for us to be able to be in this conversation and this negotiation. And that is going to be their challenge. If they have something to offer that can genuinely help the people, it is, they are just, because of the fact that they have histories of not being histories and contemporary examples of not being honest brokers, right? With that technology, it's going to be a really difficult thing to see how it's going to play out. And, Jamie's point about movement being connected to whether you get the vaccine or not is really reminding me of the first couple webinars we did and the concern we were having around immunity transport, passports, right? So some of the conversations that were there on that, once again, thinking through, with all the checkpoints and borders and boundaries, right, that come up in particular in a conversation about patriarchy, right? What is that going to mean for just even more level and layers of policing at those boundaries, those borders, those checkpoints?
A comment here that from Andrew that LA Time has already started the blame game. Was playing the blame game with the Black community's skepticism over vaccine, and particularly then people who do gendered care work but aren't classified as essential workers, like sex workers, are really vulnerable. And then, of course, Ricky's point that as a Black male, the people who played a part is warned us to what our government will do and have done to our community. There are facts to support the history of experiments and vaccines on Black people. Yes, we are being cautious. And of course, another comment was pointing to the Tuskegee experiments and other pieces, and of course, beta lifting of the HIV/AIDS piece. Another quick comment is that what I worry is that the only form of care to affect communities will be vaccines, which I believe, will help, but not fix the problem. And to add insult to injury, they might come up with racist cultural stereotypes to blame communities rather than understanding what care really means. So, yeah. Thanks for.
I have also seen on the news bringing on Black folk and Latinx folk that have participated in the trials to be a voice and encourage other people in the community to go ahead and participate and take the vaccine as a way of galvanizing and mobilizing the community.
Mhm.
You know, I'm really
I believe, honestly, this is Ricky, and the only way they can strategically get people of color to actually trust the vaccine is through people who look like us, who actually are trusted by us. I mean, scientists, the doctors, the nurses, to actually administer the vaccine. You know, I mean, I'm sorry. I, I, I mean, I'm 54 years old, and I experienced quite a bit. And I know that the government will pick out who they feel should be tested or get the real vaccine, and who they're going to experiment on. So I mean, it's a trust factor. I believe that's the only way they will be able to actually get the people of color to trust anything they put on the market.
So I just finished changing Janelle's diapers. I'm listening to this great conversation. I feel like it's pointing us in a direction to have more of this conversation. It's really important, and maybe invite some folks into the conversation who can help facilitate a lot of the things that we've been bringing up. And I just want to contribute a little bit. It's making me think a lot of our coalition's work is about defense and thinking about what kind of defense and protection and safety we need to build in these times. Um, that's what I'm thinking about. Just the further criminalization of folks, the vulnerability of folks. This space in particular, we're naming our LGBTIQ fam, gender nonconforming folks, femme folks. I'm thinking about, there we're talking about all these experiments, and we don't have to go too far too to also name folks in the detention center who recently have been experiencing sterilization too. So I just this wisdom and knowledge that we have in our lineages of the way the medical industrial complex and the police state work together. I think we play an important role as a coalition, as Jamie was naming, and like making sure we're exposing that folks have autonomy over their bodies and decisions. Um, and wherever we need to build safety, defense, and protection, the other piece is reclaiming resources too, because our our wellness and our illness is very much linked to our access to resources. So I think how we use these times also to reclaim resources, and as we know, a lot of the resources or majority of the resources are in military and policing. So I'm just trying to make that's what's coming up for me, that connection, and how we need to reclaim resources and make sure that we have what we need to be well. um yeah, and if we could design a vaccine, if there's other sources for vaccines too, that doesn't have to be from these corporations, or just our ways of taking care of ourselves to make sure that we're well. I feel like it would be good to have a more dedicated space to this conversation, and that's one thing I can that I'm taking from this conversation tonight, is that we're gonna need to have more space for these conversations and actions. Was there anyone else who was trying to get in the conversation or add more things that you want to make sure we're covering in the upcoming our upcoming meetings?
Very quiet. Maybe I'll just add a little tune to that. There's a couple messages in there about how the experimentation on Puerto Rican women when U.S. was in the 50s was testing birth control and gender to medical colonialism in the recent past is a serious thing. And then another comment reminds of W.B. Du Bois's, how does it feel to be a problem? One thing I really appreciate, this gender and sexuality group plus war on youth equal conversation about what it feels to be a target.
The last I want to add in our data bodies project work in the coalition where we were just looking broadly at data collection in our lives and impact. There were some stories from folks about when folks refuse anything from the system, but in particular refusing vaccines, the consequences that folks face as brutal as having their children removed and taken. And in another webinar, we discussed DCFS, the Department of Child Family Services, and just the way policing is interconnected throughout systems. So I just really appreciate that we're lifting up the medical industrial complex and the police, and to remind us in our work when we talk about the stalker state, we're talking about many interconnected systems and how they position themselves, how they work together to harm our folks. So when we stand up to refuse anything, what are the ways that the state, what are the ways that they position themselves to force whatever their goal is on us? So that's what my mind always goes to defense and protection too, because that's kind of the scenarios that I'm thinking about when we don't feel safe to take a vaccine or whatever it is in our bodies. What is the fight that we're up against, and that these should not and don't have to be individual fights. And that's why we show up collectively here to think about what does the collective fight look like to defend each other and support each other. Anyone else want to chime in? Thank you all for everything that each of you have been sharing. Just want to make space if anyone has not shared and wants to, you're very welcome. And if anyone else who has shared wants to add, feel free.
Much love to everybody here. I just want to say, once again, so appreciative of the coalition's work. I was telling Hamid earlier today, and I have so many drafts of text written to Jamie that all the webinars and conversations are so important, but last week's shifted some things for me. So, just thanks for doing the work, and thanks for making it accessible when we have mommy/teaching duties. And so we can't, be out on a Tuesday night. Yeah. And yeah, just thank you. I hear my son telling somebody else that Santa Claus is not real. So I'm going to go figure out what's going on with that. And just sending you guys tons of love.
Thank you, Vita.
Thank you so much. Last call for any other final comments, folks, or other thoughts. Thank you,
Cool, cool, cool. So maybe just quick announcement, Mariela, next Tuesday would be our Warren Youth webinar at 6 o'clock, and we'd invited folks from Cage to join us. Sorry, I had to sneeze. And that is Cage is a group out of England that has been building and organizing around the criminalization of youth, particularly Muslim youth, South Asian and Middle Eastern youth in England, and then how it's expanding into Europe. But then, so we have been building with them. So hopefully we'll be having them as guests as well, which is next Tuesday.
That sounds amazing. Thank you. Everybody welcome next Tuesday. Also, if you know other young folks in your life, that space is especially dedicated and led for young people. So please feel free to invite them if they're not already tired of Zoom school. It'll be a different Zoom school with us.
So I guess, Chala, do you have any other closing thoughts or comments?
There we go. I'm here. Something that I was thinking around is how the fact that trans people and two-spirit folks and intersex folks and queer folks too have always been on the margins of society. We've always been the ones that have gotten the blunt end of shit. And so yeah, I think, oh, and so, as she mentioned, Vita mentioned around like, what has been gained through medicine to HIV and AIDS medicines have given. They've gained a lot. They've gained a whole corporation. So I think we need to protect our siblings and like empower our siblings in whatever ways that looks like, to educate themselves about this shit, to like talk about this shit, and to like struggle with each other through this shit, because Corona is not going away right now. We're spiking in LA. Um, um, and the people, like you said, Baba, the people that are most affected are sex workers, and that includes trans sex workers and queer sex workers. Yes. So just if you have someone that's, if y'all have someone that's like seriously, and I'm challenging y'all. If y'all got money, give it to some sex workers that are trans. If you got money, give it to some trans people that need it. Also, if you have someone in your life that's trans, just show them some freaking love and check on them right now. Because this last year was not so good for us, and it's not going to get any better. Let's just be real. But yeah, That's all I have to say. Oh, one thing one thing that's an announcement. Can I say an announcement right now, y'all? Okay. So Transa, which is this queer archival thing that my friend Byron, who's been on these calls before, and Queer Apocalypse, we are throwing Cancel the Rent Ball. A lot of it will be on like one of the avenues like Insta or Facebook, but a lot of it will be a protest to protest Mitchell Farrell, you know? So more deets about that will be coming out soon. There are flyers. I can send the flyer to the Stop LAPD Spying email. And yeah, if you wanna, support, that'll be great. It's gonna be December the 18th at Friday December the 18th. I wanna say at 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Chela. Just want to say thank you to everybody who joined us tonight and gave your input. The meeting was recorded, so we will definitely, there's memory, our own and also the recording to remember what everybody shared. Your input is taken and received, and I hope you get to see your input, the fruit of it in the coming year. Thank you for the conversation, the topics that you all brought, things that you liked from past meetings, and things that you would like to see. We hope to see you in person, if not in person, in these webinars. You're welcome every Tuesday to join us. And just as Chela was naming our LGBTIQ folks who are in the margins, that we are also the folks who are leading movements. And so just want to honor all of our trans and queer, intersex, gender nonconforming folks, young folks, the unborn, everybody who is leading movement, whether they're visible or not. I just want to send a lot of love to us, to them, and to everybody here. If you didn't give input tonight and you have some thoughts that come up, we have a general email, stoplapdspying@gmail.com. Feel free to share your feedback on what you like or what you'd like to see, and also room for improvement. We'd be happy to receive your feedback. Thank you, Hamid, for dropping it in the chat right there. And that's it for tonight, folks. Thank you so much. We wish you a good night. Hope you get your needs met. Hope you get some rest. And looking forward to reconnecting soon. Thank you all. Take care. Much love and gratitude.